Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Today on Tallidus Plays, we continue our Kerbal Space Program playthrough. And after our previous episode, you'll notice we have quite a bit of science to spend. So let's go into the R&D department and see what we've got. Again, for sake of completionism, we'll unlock this node of aviation for 45 science. Some great new options. Heavy rocketry will come in handy with that Poodle engine. It is basically the size up from the Terrier. So whereas the Terrier was our small rocket efficient engine, the Poodle is our medium rocket efficient engine in space. Space exploration, which involves the EVA repair kit, which will help out in a pinch. The Probodobodine experiment control station for unmanned craft. And of course our hitchhiker storage container with a crew capacity of 4. This is coming in handy if we want to transport non-pilots like engineers or scientists, and also tourists. And we can't forget the ever-useful ladder. Looking here, we have advanced command modules. I might grab this because it introduces us to the Mark 1-3 command pod, which you can't tell by now is actually, instead of single person, it holds 3. Yeah, the 2.5 meter heat shield, that was essential if we're using the larger command pod, so we are going to buy that, because this unlocks the external fuel duct, aka a fuel line, and that will actually be instrumental in helping us design more efficient rockets. We can do things like asparagus staging or onion staging with this, where fuel can flow from one tank to another while the craft is flying without any input from us. But these Rockomaxes, those are the big guys. Those will be what fuels our Poodle and our Skipper liquid fuel engines. Let's go to mission control here. And we need to find some more contracts. Well, we have some of these rescue contracts now. So rescuing is actually a cheap way. It's actually a profitable way to add Kerbals to your crew. Sometimes they involve rescuing them from orbit of Kerbin, which is where we already are. So we just go up in orbit, save them, and come back down. Others involve rescuing them from orbit of the moon, or even orbit of other planets altogether. Now you notice here we have a new contract to explore Minmus. So in Kerbal Space Program, our home planet doesn't just have one moon, it has 2. It's got the Mun, which is our sort of standard moon-sized moon, but it also has Minmus. Now Minmus is a very small moon. It's actually got a very, very low gravity, but it makes it pretty easy to land on. It's a little trickier to get to since it is so small, but it's a very, very good way of getting some extra science. So we will take this. This wants us to just do a flyby. Just fly by Minmus and gather some scientific data, which we will do. Going back here, we will click on this Rescue Philly from Orbit of Kerbin mission, and we will accept that contract. And then we can go to the tracking station. And now we should be able to see where they are. Look at that. That's Philly's pod. Luckily, they're pretty much equatorial orbit, so we don't have to get wacky. It is a little far out, but again, we're going to go to Minmus today. So I think Philly will be good. What we're going to do is actually design a mission where we take a 3-seater pod, we bring 2 Kerbins, and we come back. Or sorry, we're going to bring 2 Kerbals with us. We're going to come back with 3 Kerbals because Philly will join us. So, having all that in mind, let's check our ever-helpful Delta V map, which will tell us how much Delta V we need to get all the way to Minmus. Again, the Delta V should be pretty much the same for both. But Minmus, let's see, a total of 4670. Again, that's because it takes a little less effort to circularize and land, so less required than the Mun. But again, we do want to come back, so we're going to calculate here 4670, and then we add backwards all the steps to get there. So we'll call that 200, 200, 400. At worst case, we'll say that's 1,000. So 1,400. So we'll say, just for safety, 6,000 meters per second of Delta V is what we're going to shoot for on this mission. So again, 6,000 meters per second of Delta V is what we want. But again, we have an extra part. We need to stop by Philly's pod and grab Philly before the end of the mission. So that will actually consume a little bit more Delta V to rendezvous properly. So let's just add on maybe another 500 to be safe. So between our Minmus mission and picking up Philly, I'm going to say we need 6,500 meters per second of delta V on this craft, and of course an open seat for Philly to hop into when we rendezvous. Let's go ahead and start assembling our spaceship. I mentioned earlier I would explain how onion staging works. If you take the bottom tank of a set, and again I have this on 4x symmetry, what we can do is use this yellow liquid fuel line, or the external fuel duct, and we'll click on the outer tank, and then we'll click on the inner tank. And you notice that did it all the way around in 4 symmetry. So what that does is, while the craft is launching, I can have all 5 engines burning, the 4 on the outside and the 1 in the middle. When the 4 exterior tanks run out of fuel, and I jettison them with this stage, the interior tank will still be full of fuel. They'll effectively be fueling the center engine from this outside fuel. So it's a lot more efficient to launch that way. Okay, we're on the launch pad here. We will open up maneuver mode, turn on SAS, check that we only have 2 Kerbals in the craft. 1 seat is open, throttle up to max, and let's get launched. Camera flips, and there we go. We are now circularized. So I'm going to pop in a quick save there. We will check our map pod first. So we're setting this as our new target. Again, there was a slight deviation in the orbital path. That's why there's ascending and descending nodes. But you can see here it's only 1 degree. It's very, very minimal. And then looking at this, again, you kind of want to play it by ear. This looks like I want to fire around here. Again, just about 90 degrees forward in the path. And we'll see how close this gets us to the pod. Okay, that's not too bad. Again, these show two separate instances. So we have here our first intersect, and we have here our second intersect. Our burn. So we'll take that for now. That's close to 11 kilometers, 470 meters a second. We're going to point at our maneuver, and we'll burn here at 28 seconds, because that's half of 56. Again, this is to set up the encounter with our Phillies pod. And we're trying to do this to rescue Philly before we go on to Minmus, if at all possible. Initiating the burn at T minus 28 seconds. Again, it's not going to be exact because we're setting up a rendezvous here. So it's a little bit of an interpretive science, if you will. Just trying to keep us pointed at that blue. It's a little tricky when all these nodes are sort of crossing over like they are, but we're trying to stay centered on the dark blue maneuver. There we go, activating second stage here. This is actually the final engine stage of the mission. So hopefully this has enough fuel to take us all the way to Minmus and back after we rescue Philly. And so at this point we can go to the map here. We see our orbit lining up. I'm not going to exit the maneuver node yet, though, because I do want to try to stay on it as much as possible. And then we'll cut it right at the end here. And then again, just a tiny little shift up throttle. We want to get this ideally as close to 0 as possible. That means we have burned very close to our target orbit. Less than 1 meter a second is usually pretty good. There we go. 0.0. Consider that successful. This first intersection happens here. When we are at this point, the second one, Philly will continue to travel and catch up to us right here. So this is all happening over the course of one orbit. A little bit. Yeah, 3 minutes. That's enough time. We'll add a maneuver there. And again, we can use this to sort of fine-tune that interaction just a bit. And again, it won't be perfect, but you can see if I make that node, the descending node, line up with it, inevitably that means we will be closer. And you can see here that's only 4.3 meters per second, a very small burn required. So let's turn the craft to the proper orientation here. So instead of 0.4 seconds, we will try to take a little bit longer to make this burn. So I'm going to probably start it at like minus 5 seconds or so. So again, you can throttle up there to sort of match. So again, I sort of throttled up till it would take about double where I started it. Okay, and then again, we're just kind of, there we go. I'm going to consider that close enough. And yeah, that looks pretty good. 0.6 kilometers. So we should be within visual range of Philly's pod. So here's what happens. When we come around, we're going to be whipping past this thing. Actually, it will be whipping past us. So what we'll need to do is perform one more burn where we catch up to its speed. Now, you could set up a maneuver to do that. So I could click here, right at the interaction point, add a maneuver, speed up, change our normal, anti-normal, and try to make sure it matches properly and take a lot of time to do it. Actually, that didn't take too long. But an easier way is to basically cancel out your relative motion. So instead of doing all that, we'll exit, go back to normal view. And what you can do is, on this, normally it says either orbit or surface. However, when you have a target, it now has a new speed called target speed. And this is your relative speed to your target. So what we can do is we basically wait until just ahead of our interaction with the target. We can burn in a way that slows our speed relative to the target's speed, effectively meaning that we are matching its speed. So if it was going 80, we're going 20. We want to speed up to where we're going 80. So we speed up by 60, and we're suddenly going the same speed. So our relative speed is 0. So I'll do a quick save. I'll show you what I mean here. So we're going to quick save. We're going to warp. Again, this is at 4 hours, 12 minutes away. So let's warp. We don't want to be past it. So let's go just a little earlier in our orbit. 4 hours, 4 minutes. That should be good. We'll warp to that point. So we're going to go out, away from Kerbin. We are approaching Philly's orbital area. And pretty soon you can see here our target speed is getting close to our 480 meters per second. All right, so at this point, Philly is approaching quite quickly. That's us. That's Philly. So her velocity is 750. Ours is only 381. We need to slow down before we get to this intersection. Again, this intersection happens in about 7 minutes' time. So I might wait a little bit longer because I know we can change our velocity pretty quickly. But the way we'll do that, I'll go ahead and line this up. That's prograde, right? So that would be burning towards our target. If I burn that way, we would be increasing the speed, which we do not want to do. So we're going to go retrograde. Again, this is relative to the target. So you see here, instead of that circular pink icon, we have this sort of X pink icon. Now, the yellow is sort of just coincidentally in roughly the same spot, but what we're really focused on is the pink sort of X there, the sort of pink triangle-shaped X. We want to keep our craft pointed to that, and that will be how we slow down our relative velocity. So I will get a little bit closer. Again, this is 6.5 minutes away. Let's warp up to 5 minutes. And there we go. We can see it coming into view now. That yellow square is our current active target. 34 kilometers away, but look how quickly it's closing in. It just went 2 kilometers. So we will hit Z, and we're going to throttle up here, and we'll keep pointed at that pink downward facing X there. And again, we want to drop this speed to 0 if at all possible. Again, we want to get as close as we can. I think you have to be within, I believe, 2 kilometers to interact with an object that is not already part of your space agency. So in this case, Philly's pod is effectively sort of an alien craft, if you will. On that note, I am going to stop the engine here while we still have a little bit of speed. We'll stop it here, so 70 meters per second. That way we're still headed towards the pod at a decent clip, and we won't have to turn around and kind of reaccelerate. So again, we can check here. Look at what that did to our orbit. We are almost now matching Philly's orbit. And we have a new interaction here. This is coming up at 2.7 kilometers. We'll be going about 73, so about the same speed. So again, what you can do if you're feeling lazy, that's 4 minutes away. You can warp a little bit closer. And look at that. Philly will warp ever so close to us. But now we want to change our direction. So I'm going to actually point opposite. We want to get this yellow retrograde to line up with the pink retrograde. So you fire on the opposite side, sort of the opposite way that it would work for prograde. And this way we have effectively altered our orbit just a bit. And now these have lined up again. And what do you know? We still have 33 meters per second of speed. And our new interaction is right there at 0.1 kilometers. We are due for a pretty good interaction. Actually, very good. That's 100 meters away. And in the depths of space, that's as close as you want to get, unless you're actually trying to dock, which we are not. So we'll quick save, because that's great. Again, you never know what the Kraken will do. Sometimes everything just explodes for no reason. So we use quick save before we do any sort of docking attempts or spacewalk attempts. I am going to stay in this mode and just time warp a little bit here to let the craft drift closer together. Again, we're still going 30 meters per second. That is still pretty fast. So this gets to about 300. We will start firing our engine to line up a bit more and slow down. Okay, and now at this point we can just fire a very gentle engine thrust. And again, we don't want to be going directly into the other craft because there will be a natural drift. So we'll say 0.2 is good enough. And you don't want that yellow to be going right. Again, if we were trying to dock, that might be different. But for now, we just want to get it close enough to where Philly can kind of float over to our pod and join us, which you can. And again, if you're wondering how the hotkey to switch between crafts that are sort of near each other in orbit is the bracket key. So under backspace, you have those 2 bracket keys, left and right brackets. If you tap on one of those, it'll switch to the other command pod. Philly, we will send out EVA and use R to activate the jetpack. And what do you know? Sending the crew captain into a bit of a tailspin. as he leaves. He is a scientist, which is always good. Scientists are great additions to the team here. Got a pretty fancy looking jetpack too. I don't know if that's an upgraded jetpack or Maxio Construction Toys. Interesting. Well, here we are. Again, we barely did any action with the jetpack. We're just kind of lining up with the pod here because it was already getting close as is. Philly will now very expertly navigate to our command pod. And you know where you're at here. Can you do an EVA report? Is there anything useful? Yeah, we'll take that. Space high over Kerbin. Already generating science data. Look at that. What a good scientist. Press F to grab the ladder. And climb up a little bit and B to board. Boom. That's part of the contract complete. All we need to do now is bring Philly back to Kerbin safely. And that will be one mission completed. But we still want to try to fly by Minmus. We have 2,600 meters per second of delta V left, which is a lot. Let's go back to orbital speed. We'll change our target from Philly's pod to Minmus. So we add a maneuver here, and you can see now if I click, if I add any fuel to this normal, look at that, it's going to lift our orbit up very easily into an equatorial sort of plane. And then we can use our prograde retrograde to sort of dial that in, get a little bit closer. Again, you can get very close to Minmus. Perform this burn anyways. Full blast. And again, I'm not super worried about being exact right here, so we're just going to keep an eye on the craft itself, and we'll cut this off when this gets as close to 0 as possible. If it ever starts going up, kill your engine, because you're starting to go the wrong way. That looks good to me. Now we can check the map, and look at that, our periapsis is at a respectable 12,000. What's great about Minmus as well is they have these things called the flats. So you can see here, these dark teal areas are basically sea level. They are the same height as the sea level of Minmus, and they are completely flat. So you're guaranteed that if you try to land on them, you will have a nice, easy, flat surface to land on. So what I'm actually going to do is already set up a landing procedure. I'm going to keep burning retrograde till this periapsis gets very close over this particular flat here. Again, we don't want it touching the ground just yet, but we can get pretty close. That looks good, 4,000. And we can honestly warp till right about here and get ready to land. However, before we do that, science! At this point, we will point retrograde. Again, we have plenty of fuel, so I'm not worried about having enough delta V to get back from Minmus. We're going to tap G. Let's turn off the lights because we don't really need them for this. Extend our landing gear. And let's check the map here. Yeah, we can now do a small burn. And again, we want this to basically put us on a very natural kind of descent gradient. We don't want to be going straight down. That looks pretty good. And again, on Minmus, this is small potatoes. We're not too worried about impacting at a fast speed, because it's very easy to change our speed over this particular moon. And look at that, just above Minmus's Greater Flats. That's where we are right now. So this is where we will be landing. Let's speed up time just a little bit. Again, you will lose the ability to time warp when you get too close to a particular surface. Yep. There you go. Can't warp faster than 1 time speed below 3,000 meters. And the PE, that's pressure related. That only affects if it has an atmosphere. So we're not worried about that. Again, you want to be on surface speed, not orbital speed. Surface speed to land when you're close enough. Point retrograde here. We're going to let our craft descend to about 1,000 meters before we do our next burn. Again, we're only going 65 meters a second, which is fast, but we can quickly slow down from that speed, so I'm not too worried. Famous last words. I know I've said that before, and it's been a huge issue. Once we get to 1,000, I'll slow down to about 30 meters a second. And again, we're going to pick some more speed up because we're still kind of falling. But you saw there, that was a pretty quick burn to slow us down to 30. Safe landing speed is usually under 5. It's under 5 or 6 meters per second. Ideally, you want to be going 0 when you touch the ground. That's considered a perfectly soft landing. But in most cases, you do what they call a hover slam, where you slow down to 0 a little bit above the ground, and then you kind of drop the last couple meters. And again, now I'm just kind of using Z and X alternatively to sort of burn real quick and then kill the engines, because you don't want to go so fast that you start going back upwards. And then when you get to a good spot, you can sort of use shift to feather the engine. I like to feather it so we're slowing down, but we're not slowing down too quickly. Again, if I could hit 0 at 0 altitude, that would be great. And right here, I've sort of throttled down a bit to where I'm keeping my speed at a perfect 1 meter a second. That is nice and slow, and then we'll kill it right about here. And a nice, gentle touchdown on Minmus. Look at that. Landing legs doing their job, keeping our engine off the ground. And we'll go ahead and perform a quick save. The nice part here is that we have 2 pilots on board, which means that whichever one EVAs, the other one can maintain our stability assist. So we hopefully won't have the same issue that we had on the moon. Also, being on the Greater Flats, we know that the entire area is flat. It's sort of like a salt bed, if you will. It's where they do the speed tests out west. to have Philly just grab these again before I forget to later on in the mission. But this will be pretty much the extent of our science gathering for this particular mission. Got our data from the scan, and let's get the barometer. Looking good. All right. Again, hop back aboard with Philly. And I think that is going to do it for our mission to Minmus. We have almost 2,000 meters per second left, so that's plenty of Delta V to get back home. What we need to do now is basically get back up into orbit. We're going to go east for an equatorial orbit around Minmus. And honestly, when you're going back to Kerbin from Minmus, it doesn't really matter where you are in the orbit. We're going back to a large body from a very, very small one. So the gravity well will capture us pretty easily. So at this point, we're just going to use shift to very gently lift off. And almost immediately, we're going to point at the horizon, a little bit above it, but basically right at the horizon. Keeping an eye on your apoapsis, we will throttle up. And we want that to get up to about 10,000 meters, 10 kilometers. And again, we're aiming just a little bit above the horizon here. Oh, that's more than enough. Pressing G to retract our landing legs. Not that it really matters at this point in the mission, but it's just good practice. And you can see there, we're already going very far up, and circularization will be easy as pie. But honestly, I might just turn this into our return burn, if you will. So I'm going to click on... We could circularize here at apoapsis, but just for sake of simplicity, I'm going to get lined up here. Again, to return, if you're in a counterclockwise orbit like I am, you pick a point on your orbit that is between the body that you're orbiting and the body that you want to get to, which is Kerbin. And we just fire prograde until our periapsis drops low enough. So let's see here how low we can get it. And again, generally you want it to be somewhere in the range of 40 kilometers, right about 40 to 45. We'll say 40 should be good. And again, we're coming back in the properly designed teardrop-shaped command pod, so hopefully we should be captured. We might skip off and do one aero break, but ideally we'll just be captured in the first round here. We'll go to 39,000 meters. And again, you just want to make sure that when you fire your engines, you're not firing into a mountain if you're too close to the planet. So that oranges are going to be our new trajectory, so we're looking pretty safe there. We can line up with our blue maneuver and continue on our way. See, again, I kind of overshot there. The crafts are getting heavier the bigger they are, so they become a little bit more unwieldy. When you start spinning them around quickly, they're a little harder. There's more inertia the heavier the craft is. Let's time warp. Again, very short burn, only 11 seconds. We have to get above 3,000 meters before we can actually time warp at all. So again, that's arguably one of the only downfalls of Minmus, is you can't really warp when you're that close to the moon itself. Again, I say moon. This is one of the two moons of Kerbin. The big moon is called the Mun, M-U-N. The smaller moon is called the Minmus, which is this one right here. So just for any confusion so far. Now we can auto time warp, and it will slowly, it'll increase the higher we get up. The time warp should increase on its own. And you know what? Before we actually go, I'm going to try one more EVA. See if we can get another EVA report. Still the lowlands. Okay. Never mind. Let's time warp our way around. And again, you can see there, that's the Kerbin. That's where we want to go. Back home with Philly on board. Align my craft up here. Again, let's kick on the lights so that you guys can have some idea of where the craft is. As the game continues, I will install more lights on the craft to kind of light it up throughout the video. Because it is a little, I acknowledge it's not exactly that fun to see something in pitch black on YouTube. So hopefully that is at least visible in silhouette. When this gets to T-5, we will start our burn. And we'll do most of the burn in map mode, because I want to keep an eye on that periapsis. Fast forward just a little bit. That looks good. Go to the map. Again, we are zooming out from Minmus, and we are going to focus on Kerbin here. We're burning. exit out with a couple seconds left. That way we can manually kind of dial this in. And again, I'm going to shift to increase it ever so gently at the end here. So we're barely accelerating because we're getting very close to our target periapsis. Again, I'm looking for, we'll say 40 kilometers. If it gets to 38, 39, that's not a big deal. That looks good to me. Back at normal speed, ready for our official splashdown after our Minmus mission. There we are. Splashdown complete with one extra Kerbonaut in tow. Philly Kerman has joined the program. We return to the Kerbal Space Center, and look at that, 19 experiments recovered for a total of 863 science earned. We've got crew reports, temperature reports, pressure scans, mystery goo, and a couple of surface samples. Parts value isn't very negligible at this point. We're not worried about that. And look at that, all that experience for the crew. 8 XP for Philly, 6 for Valentina, and 6 for Jeb. They have all advanced to level 2 on their respective skill trees. Let's take a look at all of our messages here. World first milestones. We've got a rendezvous around Kerbin. That's when we rescued Philly. Crew transfer. Flyby of Minmus, orbit of Minmus, spacewalk around Minmus. Suborbital spaceflight above Minmus. We landed on the surface of Minmus. We walked on the surface of Minmus, and we planted a flag on Minmus. And then, of course, all of the relevant achievements for returning from Minmus. Contract parameters are complete. We saved Philly. They are now part of our crew. We explored Minmus, and we retrieved data from Minmus. All contracts complete. Hundreds of thousands of extra credits and some even more bonus science granted to our space program. Like and subscribe if you'd like to continue following our Kerbal Space Program playthrough. And until next time, this has been Tallidus Play.